Hey guys, Dr. Goldberg. I wanted to give you a quick overview of Chapter 3. Again, this is a 15-minute version, so you need to go through it yourself. But I wanted to cover a couple of highlights on global business. When we talk about global business or international business, we're really talking about any business activity where goods or services or money are exchanged over national borders. Largely, it's the result of there being some sort of advantage that one country has over another in terms of producing or growing that particular product or service. So, for example, we import a lot of fruits and vegetables from countries with warmer climates because they're more suited to growing those products than we are. So basically there's two sides of international business: exporting, which is when you're selling and shipping materials and products to other countries; importing, which is when you're purchasing raw materials or products from other countries and bringing them into your country. A couple of components of international business: balance of trade. These are sort of macroeconomic concepts. So at the level of the U.S., for example, we look at balance of trade, which is the total value of our exports minus the value of our imports over some fixed period of time. The trade deficit, which is a label you've probably heard of. A negative balance of trade means that our imports exceed our exports, which is a not very desirable position to be in. That means we're more reliant on other countries than they are on us. And balance of payments has to do with the total flow of money into a country minus the total flow of money out of that country over some period of time. International business is sometimes restricted. Sometimes it can be for political reasons. Sometimes it can be for economic reasons. Generally speaking, countries are usually eager to export their products. Hey, we have another market that we can sell our products or services in. It's a good thing. So they want to develop a favorable balance of trade by doing that. But oftentimes, for various reasons, there are restrictions put on the extent to which countries will import products or services from another country. Some of those restrictions come in the form of tariffs. Tariffs are basically taxes that are imposed on foreign goods and services entering into a country. It could be a revenue tariff. Basically, if the U.S. decides we want to make money off this deal, we're going to put a tax on every German car that comes into the United States so that the government takes a little bit first before putting German cars on the market to U.S. consumers. They could be protective tariffs that countries impose specifically because that country also manufactures or sells the same product or service. So if they let the foreign competitors come in, that would sort of destroy business of the domestic producer of that product. So if we didn't put taxes on a lot of things that came from China, where it's generally inexpensive to make them, a lot of U.S. companies might be put out of business because we can't compete on the basis of price. Okay. Dumping has to do with the exporting of large quantities of a product at a price lower than what that product is sold for in the home market. And I will tell you, we do this in the United States, for example. So we want to export to China because China is a huge growing market. The problem is Chinese consumers don't make a lot of money, so they can't buy our products and services. So oftentimes what U.S. manufacturers will do is dump the products in China at a price lower than what they would charge in the United States. And that's basically the gist of dumping. Barriers to trade or trade restrictions can also take the form of non-tax forms. So it could be things that a government does to favor certain suppliers or to restrict certain suppliers. It could be an import quota. So we might say, okay, we're only going to allow X number of Toyotas coming in from Japan to be imported into the United States over a certain period of time. It could be an embargo, which is a complete cease of trading with a particular country. So, for example, we have not historically done trade with Cuba for quite some time. We don't do trade with North Korea because there are a lot of political differences that we have with those countries, or that we have had with Cuba. We're starting to lift the embargo. Or it could be in the form of foreign exchange control. So it could be that we simply restrict the amount of whatever the currency unit is in North Korea because we don't want that circulating, and that effectively serves as a barrier to trade. We could also work to devalue the currency of a certain country. So, for example, if we're not having a good relationship with country X, we can say, okay, well, we're only going to pay 10 cents on the dollar for their currency. Bureaucratic red tape is another way to, they just basically you wear companies from another country down by creating so many hurdles for them to jump through in order to do business in your country. And it could be cultural attitudes that people that live in the other country simply just don't like that product. I will tell you, the French are very negative on the notion of McDonald's. It is, and this is true, the McDonald's that is on Champs-Élysées, and that's kind of like the Rodeo Drive or, the really high, or Fifth Avenue of Paris, is the most popular restaurant in Paris. But if you ask a French person, or a Parisian in particular, how they feel about McDonald's, I can tell you they will not give you a positive response. Okay, so this kind of gives you an idea about the extent of international business. In the U.S., international trade is about a quarter of our total gross domestic product, so that's a pretty sizable amount right there. Over time, trade barriers have decreased. The world has become a more global place, and obviously, if you want to be successful economically, you have to be able to trade so you can take advantage of the products and services that other countries have to offer. Obviously, international trade is not going away, it's only expanding. And a large part of the expansion has come from the World Trade Organization's issuance or agreement on the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade, or GATT treaty. And there's 153 countries that have joined forces to focus on reducing and eliminating tariffs and other trade barriers. The idea being, let's make the world one place instead of making it into 153 places. An economic community is a group of countries that come together to promote free movement of resources and products. The first and largest was the European Union, and it's expanded considerably since the early 80s, which is when it started. But still, you notice Switzerland right there, smack in the middle of it. Switzerland has really dug its heels in the ground that they will not join the European Union. In addition to allowing the free movement of products and services, it also allows the free movement of labor, the free movement of people. So, for example, if you carry a passport from Spain, you can go in the resident line if you're going into Poland, for example. So even though your passport says Spain, you're considered a European Union citizen, so you can go in the citizen line as opposed to the other. Following the beginning of the European Union, North America sort of said, okay, well, we need to be competitive with this, so maybe the US, Canada, and Mexico should try joining forces too. So we have, and we created the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years, probably 15, 20 years ago. And so that promotes free trade among the three North American countries. Chile is expected to join that too, so stay tuned for that. So how do companies get into international business? Well, it kind of goes on a scale from least involvement to highest degree of involvement. So the least degree of involvement of oh my gosh of involvement is through licensing. And licensing is basically a contract that says, okay, we produce this product and service. We'll let you sell it or even produce it in your country too, and bear our company's trademark and logo and name in exchange for some royalty or some other compensation. The good side or the positive side of that is it allows companies to enter different markets in other countries without a huge investment and sometimes with no investment. But the downside is you don't have any control. So they may decide to use cheaper parts in the manufacturing process, and that might tarnish your whole company's image if they do things like that. Exporting is another measure for entering international business. So you can basically create a situation where you're producing the products and you're keeping your company's name on it, but you're exporting it to another country, and it's being sold under your company's brand name. So you maintain a little bit more control than you would under a licensing agreement. But the downside is so you can establish sales offices and other branches in other countries, but you're still not really establishing yourself. So you're really relying on the hope that people will recognize your company's brand name because nobody's really there to root for it or to create a lot of buzz about it. Joint ventures are partnerships that are formed to achieve a specific goal. So basically, if there's a company that's, one example is Kellogg's, the cereal manufacturer, has a joint venture in the UK and a lot of European countries for the marketing of cereals. Kellogg's is not a known name in other countries the way it is in the United States. So they have other companies that have known names in the cereal market to form a joint venture with Kellogg's so that it's still Kellogg's. I'm trying to think what the name of the cereal is. Special K with chocolate flakes, for example, which we sell here, Special K chocolate. It's actually called something different. It's the exact same product, but it's called something different and it has a different manufacturer name when it's sold in European countries because of the joint venture arrangement. So the downside is it's complex to create a joint venture, and it involves a high level of commitment on everybody involved. But the upside is that you're basically immediately in a market with instant access. So Kellogg's doesn't have to establish its name. The European manufacturer, whose name starts with a W, but I'm forgetting it right now, already has the brand's recognition in those markets. And finally, on the greatest level of involvement would be totally owned facilities. So if, IBM, for example, has all of its own facilities throughout the world. It doesn't try to get into joint ventures. It wants its name and brand to be visible and known throughout the world, so it owns all of its own facilities. So the advantage is direct investment provides complete control over operations. They don't have to worry if things are going to be operating differently in Peru than they are in the US, than they are in China. But the downside is that it means that the company itself has to endure a great degree of risk. I only have a few seconds left, so I'm going to end it there. This is the last slide. I have about 30 seconds left. So I'll end it here. Have a great week. Take care. Bye.